Welcome to Across the Desk. This week's episode, and I really didn't mean to do a series on state questions here in Oklahoma, but it looks like that's what's going to happen because this will be, I guess, part 3 of a series of state questions as I go over State Question 805. State Question 805 is going to ask the voters of Oklahoma to revise the Constitution to prevent longer sentencing and to reduce, what they call enhanced sentencing. And what that is what we do here in Oklahoma is if you get convicted of a crime, whether it's a violent crime, nonviolent crime, a misdemeanor, felony, when you have another crime that you commit along with it or after that, then the sentencing gets harsher. And this was probably due to the effect of tough on crime laws we had back in the early 90s, and it's one of the reasons here in Oklahoma we have a huge prison population. And it's one of the reasons why our sentences for drug related crimes and property crimes are one of the highest in the nation as far as lengths of time are concerned. So what they're going to do is they're going to try to get this on the ballot, and they need a bunch of signatures to do this, and they just started not even 2 weeks ago. What State Question 805 does is allow for a mechanism to let convicts go through a system where they can get their enhanced sentences reduced. What it does is it provides a vehicle through the Court of Criminal Appeals where they can go through a process to see if they qualify for one thing, and then what that sentence reduction would be once they send it back through the court system to do that. Now I want to show you guys the proposed ballot title, put it on the screen. Now this will be what you see if they get enough signatures to put it on the ballot, and it says, this measure seeks to add a new Article 2A to the Oklahoma Constitution. This new article accepts and does not apply to persons who have ever been convicted of a violent felony. It would prohibit the use of a former felony conviction to increase the statutorily allowed base range of punishment for a person subsequently convicted of a felony. Now, I'll leave this on here for a few seconds. You can get a look at it. But honestly, go to this website here, and you can look at it yourself. Like I said, it's about 3 pages long and the ballot title question, and you can read that and get a look at it because it's pretty open. It's pretty wide range. Now the state question has 9 different sections in it, and that may seem like a bit, but each one of these sections is roughly about a paragraph, maybe 2, and the whole thing is about 2 or 3 pages long. Now I said there were 9 sections to this, and I kind of want to put the first 2 on the screen. Now the first section talks about definitions. It talks about the definitions of community supervision, and B, it talks about a definition for statutorily allowable base range of punishment, what that is, and C, what is a violent felony. And they want to be sure to define those as to let you know exactly what those are. The other thing in section 2 is exclusions, and in that it says basically that this does not apply to violent felonies, no matter when convicted, no matter what's on the record, or how many times. It doesn't count that. It only counts crimes of property and drug-related convictions. For the most part, that's pretty much what it covers. That's the first 2 sections. Now, section 3, as you'll see, says range of punishment after former felony convictions. Now, basically it says that we're going to make an exception. The exception is provided in section 2 of this article, which is violent felonies are not included in this. This is only for felonies that aren't violent. And basically it says that former convictions for 1 or more felonies shall not be used to enhance the statutorily allowable base range of punishment, included but not limited to the minimum and maximum terms for a person convicted, whether by trial or plea of guilty or nolo contendere to a felony. Now the next 3 sections are about sentence modification, and they I think they could have subsectioned these, but really the way they did it is really good. Anyway, section 4 on sentence modification, we have eligibility. This tells you who's eligible and how they're eligible. This tells you how they wouldn't be eligible as well. Section 5 on sentence modification is the initiation process. Now, this is how the whole thing in Section 5 is about how an inmate can go about getting their sentences modified through this article of the Constitution. And what it does, and it totally describes the process, where to go, how to apply, what branches would be responsible for this, and how it was to be done. Now, Section 6 on sentence modification would be about the hearing. How the hearing would be conducted is to be held in open court. Talks about how the petitioner has the right to make a statement on their behalf. It talks about how victims and everybody else could be a part of the process. And that's pretty much what Section 6 goes over. And those are the 3 sections of sentence modifications that are in this new act to change the Constitution of Oklahoma. And now we come to the last few sections here. Section 7 is the appeal to the Court of Criminal Appeals. Now, this has a process that if you were denied pursuant to subsection B of Section 5 of this act, then you can, there's a way to appeal. Now, it also talks about the length of time that you can appeal and what goes through a denial of order and all that stuff. Section 8 is implementation. It talks about when it would become effective. It would be January 1st, immediately following the passage. And then Section 9 talks about serviceability. And what this is it says that, hey, you know, if any of this provision shall be deemed void, invalid, or unconstitutional, then the other parts of this act will remain. It means that it's serviceable. The other acts are still serviceable, even though a section may deem to be unconstitutional or invalid or void. Just because a section of it doesn't mean the whole thing gets thrown out. Now, Oklahomans for criminal justice reform, and I saw a story where someone called them Oklahomans for sentencing reform, but that's not correct. If you go and Google, you will see that Oklahomans for criminal justice reform pops up, but I'm not sure if they did a name change or if they just didn't get the name right on that story I was reading. But they are the people that are pushing this state question. It's ran by, or it's headed by Executive Director Chris Steele, and he is a former congressman to the state of Oklahoma in the Oklahoma legislature several years back. But anyway, he's been the one who's been driving this for the last several years, and they're the ones who also back State Question 780 and 781 when those came up for vote a few lecture cycles back. And that's another thing. It kind of tells you something here. We're having to do, here we are, our third state question on this, and we're doing our third state question on this because there's no will to do this in the legislature. They've had limited successes on some things, but it's not really moved forward a whole lot. But when you look at the numbers on who the big donors are in our state, one of them pops up is the industry of private prisons. They give a lot of money to our legislatures and other politicians to keep that industry alive and well here. And that's probably a big reason why it doesn't move a lot in the legislature, because they got the money to throw around to really slow walk that if they want to, because let's face it, we're talking about the way they make money here. And you can tell things need to be done when one of the Oklahoma parole and pardon board members, Kelly Doyle, says that our sentencing laws when it comes to Oklahoma convicts spend nearly 70% longer in prison for property crimes than they do relative to the national average. They also spend about 79% longer for drug-related crimes than the national average does for states and incarceration for those. So there is some room for reform when we incarcerate the second most amount of people per capita behind Louisiana, and we're number 1 in incarceration of women. Something really should be done about that, because the more money we throw into criminal justice and the prison system, the less money we have for schools, the less money we have for mental health services and health services that could prevent a prison population from happening and growing. Not only that, sending people to prison, especially for long periods of time, well, is damaging to families. It's not good for mental health of kids. It just perpetuates a cycle of poverty, and with that comes more crime. So you're not really doing anything to prevent crime by establishing longer sentences based on past behavior, on other crimes that have already been tried and convicted on, if that's the case. So we're not doing our community any favors by keeping these people locked up, where it's costing us a lot of money, and it's killing families, it's killing incentive, it's killing economic growth, it's killing education, and it's something we really need to do. Now, of course, there are going to be some people against this. So far, no one's really came out real forcefully against this state question. No one's really petitioned it in the Supreme Court or anything like that. But we do have a couple of people that aren't for it. One, Kevin Stitt is one of them. Our governor is not for this law. He is a prison reform guy and wants to have prison reform. And he even says he likes some of the stuff of where this is going, but he doesn't want to do it this way. He'd rather do it through the legislature, of course. And the bigger concern he has is that this changes the Constitution. It's not just legislation that's being passed. We're actually going to change the state constitution here. So that's a big problem with him on this. Now, the other guys come out on this, and I haven't seen anybody else, but the Rogers County Sheriff. This guy, he is, what's his name? It's Sheriff Walton. He had a statement here that said, and I'm going to read it. Our focus was and will continue to be what a career criminal is, and that will be the person that won't work, is going to steal, likes to support their habit. They'll be our focus as long as I'm here. And that's what Sheriff Walton said. Of course, he's using a lot of platitudes and a lot of broad brushes, but it comes really obvious when you see something like what I'm going to put on the screen here now. This is on his website, Rogers County Sheriff's site, and one of the things that they saw here, and you can see it right there, they get money for housing criminals at the state level. So they get paid for that. This is a deal he made. He's very proud of it. He put it on the website. Hey man, we're making extra money off of this. So it's right there. So there's one reason why he would be against it. And again, this sheriff, he's the same guy who hired Betty Shelby after she shot the unarmed black man in Tulsa and killed him. And I know she was acquitted and all this stuff, but he took her in anyway, and she was obviously not very professional in the way she conducted herself. And then he goes on again last year and hires another guy named Wayne Brown. Now, Wayne Brown got fired from the Tulsa police department because what he did during training was he put out a bunch of Facebook posts that were very anti-Islamic, very racist towards that group of people and Arabs, and they let him go because of that. Hey, this violates our social media policy. We're not going to have it. So what goes on? He applies for Rogers County as a deputy jail person, and they hire him. And their whole deal was, yeah, we looked at his background, he was the most qualified, and we think people make mistakes, but they deserve second chances, I guess. I mean, that was kind of what I got. And there was something here to note. I mean, one of the things, like on the page for the sheriff's office, you can see he says, hey, the sheriff enjoys serving the community he grew up in. Well, the funny thing about this is when they asked Wayne Brown to comment on this, he said, I look forward to serving the community I grew up in. So it's like, wow, somebody got the same talking point. And the other thing that got me about this Wayne Brown guy is there's no apology there. What he said is, hey man, I'm just not going to talk about it. I don't go on social media anymore, which I don't know. He could come in on aliases, I'm pretty sure. But I'm pretty sure he still harbors the same feelings. He didn't say he didn't. He didn't have an apology. Didn't say, yeah, that was wrong of me. I shouldn't have done that. Just, I just not going to talk about it anymore. So that tells me he still has those feelings. And I have a another feeling that the sheriff and his organization he's going with, especially with Betty Shelby and this Wayne Brown guy, it tends to lean that way. So that's my show on State Question 805. I hope you've enjoyed it this week, and next week we'll talk about something else. I don't know how many other state questions there are going to be on the ballot this year. I know there's a few others. I don't know if I'll do any more, but it seems like I did a 3-part series on nothing but state questions, and you never know. There might be a 4th one, but I'll let you know. We'll see what happens. I'm just going with the flow on this thing. So I hope to see you next week right here on Across the Desk with Kit Fairchild.